For those of you who wonder if you're hearing white noise or not, no, you're hearing fans and air conditioning that doesn't really work because the Robservatory is basically a sauna. I need a split. I need to invest some big money, which I don't have, but that explains where the white noise comes from.
Observations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
I've heard it said before, like, it was a very smart man named Robert Meyer Burnett who said the currency of our current age is authenticity. And it's so true.
Imagination Connoisseurs Unlimited, in association with Max Allan Collins, present True Noir, a 10-chapter, star-studded, fully immersive audio drama that I'm in the middle of editing right now. You can pre-order this amazing audio experience, and it truly is amazing. I can say that the performances are stunning, on Kickstarter at True Noir, or go to truenoir.co and help us support this wonderful project. I assure you, you'll love it. Greetings, Imagination Connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and maybe never to be defined, your existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, moi. I am Rob. I'm coming to you from the Robservatory, doing some Robservations, coming to you, you Imagination Connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is Robservations episode number 984. You haven't seen her in a while, but I had to bring Pearl out of dry dock, or, out of the Romulus station, to talk about this. So I just got out of, I took the ladies of the home to see Alien Romulus tonight. Sophie, Zoe, Elizabeth, and myself, we all went. I was very excited to see this movie. But before I get into this, I feel, all the people that want to tune in and hear exactly what I'm saying about Alien Romulus, because that's all I care about, this is going to be a long and rambling show full of spoilers. There be spoilers here instead of whales, just so you know. When Chris Stuckman made Shelby Oaks, and he came out and he said that he didn't really want to review movies anymore, because now that he'd made one, he had a new appreciation for how hard it was to make a film, and everybody it caused a firestorm on the internet. People are like, you're supposed to review films, and everybody was up in arms, and I was very perplexed by this. Because, first of all, Stuckman's written books, and I really like Chris Stuckman's work. I think he's a good reviewer. He's a fair reviewer. He's not very hyperbolic. He tells it like it is. But I thought the reaction to Stuckman saying he didn't want to review things anymore because he'd finally made a movie was kind of odd. And I looked at that and I thought, well, I understand where he's coming from. At the same time, Todd Stashwick, who did our proof of concept for our audio drama. You can hear it on the Kickstarter page. Todd asked me, because I was reviewing Star Trek Picard Season 3, and, I've been very harsh on modern Star Trek. He asked me, how do you feel working in the industry and also critiquing other people's work? And it's interesting because I understand where he's coming from. Like, I want to love everyone's work. I know how difficult it is to make movies, and I think everybody who's made movies, they've had varying degrees of quality in their career. And for me, obviously, I've never really made some kind of an A-list, shatteringly successful feature film. I've toiled away in indie land, and most of the things that I've worked on, Free Enterprise, the only movie I've written and directed, it's okay, but it was deeply compromised because of certain production issues. Am I going to apologize for them? No. The movie stands on its own. I can sit there and explain to you why it wasn't a fully realized vision, but I'm proud of what we accomplished. And like the very first movie I edited with Peter Billingsley, a movie called Arcade, was unreleasable. It sat on a shelf, and the company Full Moon had to release it. My friend Dan Schweiger hired me at Full Moon to help Peter Billingsley. We were supposed to reconstitute this movie and drop in new special effects, and I had seen the footage, and the movie was like edited in a week, and it was awful. It was a really awful movie. And I called Dan and I said, hey, we can re-edit this movie and make it better. And he goes, have you ever edited a movie before? I said, well, no. I've edited music videos and shorts, but I did get an A in editing when I was at USC. And they allowed us to re-edit the first 10 minutes of the movie. And when they saw our 10 minutes, they couldn't believe how much better it was. And they let us finish. Peter Billingsley and I worked on that movie for 6 months. I learned almost everything I know about post-production from that experience. Now, we took a movie that was basically a low-budget, $1 million ripoff of Tron that was completely unreleasable, and we made it really, really mediocre. And I was damn proud of that mediocrity. Now, I never thought of that movie as like a Z-grade ripoff of Tron. I looked at it as an opportunity. It was a creative challenge to take that film, reconstitute it, and make it better, which I think we did. And it was nominated for Best Independent Direct-to-Video Release for 1993, 31 years ago. And I was incredibly proud of that work. Now, if somebody watched Arcade and told me that movie sucked, would it bother me? No, because I know that it's not Tron and it's not The Matrix. It is what it is. It was made for $1 million. It could never be those things. And I like all kinds of movies across the board. And I am nothing if not authentic. I've never pulled my punches when it comes to liking things. Some people can say, if I can explain to you why I like things in context. There's a lot of movies that people would say are not good that I enjoy, but I could tell you why I enjoy them. But I'm never going to claim that they're amazing films. But it's interesting because Todd Stashwick works in the industry, and he wonders how is it that I can work in the industry but also be critical of other people's work? How can I be critical of J.J. Abrams' Star Trek movies, for instance, that were made for so much money and had lots of stars in them? And what if I worked with those stars? Look, everybody knows if what they work on is great or not. You don't really have to worry about hurting people's feelings because they're aware. They are aware. And I would say when I was watching J.J. Abrams go on talk shows and saying he never liked Star Trek, I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. He himself has said, and the first question I would say to J.J. Abrams if I ever met him, I'm like, if you didn't like Star Trek, why'd you take the job? You take the job because that's what you do in Hollywood. You don't say no to a job. You take whatever job that comes along and you try and make it great. I didn't say to Dan Schweiger, I don't want to work on Arcade because it was unreleasable. What can I do? No, you take it as and sometimes you succeed and sometimes you don't. What you want to do is you want to take the job and you want to make it. You don't say no to a job. No one's going to, some actors can stand on ceremony. They can do that because especially if they're in demand, they can take their pick. But even actors never know. They're putting their trust in somebody else to make something great. And nobody, look, I've said this a million times on this show. Every time you get an at-bat and you get to make a movie, everybody on that movie is 100% committed. Nobody ever comes to work working on a feature film going, whatever. People are giving it their all. They want the movie to be great. Nobody wants to make a movie that isn't great. What has changed in the last especially 20 years is Hollywood's over-reliance, because Hollywood is so risk-averse and movies have become so expensive. A movie that should have cost $20 million ends up costing $100 million, because I also think studios don't know how to make movies properly anymore. So there's way too much money involved, and there's way too much risk. So everybody is as risk-averse as they can possibly be. And I get it. They should be. So there has been an over-reliance on dredging up old, proven IPs, which I always thought was odd, because all of the IPs are of a time. They're things that were successful were products of the era in which they were made. So to expect, I mean, it's interesting. Like Coca-Cola has been a brand, and people have been drinking Coke for 100 years. And for the most part, until they took the cocaine out, but it's been pretty much the same for 100 years. When they tried to change it in the 80s, they tried to change the formula. That was disastrous. People want Coca-Cola to be the same. But the thing about Coca-Cola is the people that are drinking Coca-Cola, it might change as health concerns go up or down. But for the most part, Coca-Cola, it knows what lane it's in, and it stays there. And it is a product that has existed for 100 years. It's not trying to grab more market share. I mean, sure, would it like to? I'm sure they're charting how much better it is than Pepsi or whatever. But for the most part, Coca-Cola isn't going anywhere. They sell a certain amount of a year. They make profit because it's not that expensive to make. And they're happy with that. But in our new age of companies like BlackRock and Vanguard, explosive growth for everybody is all anyone's chasing. And that is a zero-sum game because there's only so many people on this planet. And there's a ceiling for every business. There is not infinite growth. And with birth rates plummeting in the Western world the way they are, you can't expect profit to go everywhere. But, you know, companies don't want to hear that. If you're in the business of making money, you do whatever you can to keep making money. Which brings me to the Alien franchise. And I'm going to tell you my personal experience with the Alien franchise. As you all know, I was 7 years into, I consider 5 years old, my beginning of my great awakening, Twilight Zone, Star Trek, War of the Worlds, Planet of the Apes. These are the things that started to imprint on me. And I was very, very serious. Alien came out 7 years after my genre awakening. And already I had had mind-blowing theatrical experiences with Jaws when I was 8, Logan's Run when I was 9, Star Wars when I was 10, Superman the movie when I was 11, Star Trek the motion picture, and Alien came out when I was 12. Alien was rated R, and by the way, Alien, because it was 20th Century Fox, opened at the same theater that Star Wars opened. That was my favorite theater in the world. Every time 20th Century Fox had a big movie, from Star Wars to Big Trouble in Little China, Buckaroo Banzai, all 3 Star Wars movies, I went to the UA 150 theater on 6th and Blanchard. Because Alien was rated R, it was still tough to get into R-rated movies as a 12-year-old. I had to coerce my grandfather, whose wife had recently passed, and my grandmother, Flo, may she rest in peace, and I coerced him to take me and my sister. The thing about Alien that's hard to explain, and I've tried to explain this on the show many times, is Alien, there was nothing like it that had ever been seen before. Now, keep in mind, I understand Alien began as a movie that was called Star Beast. But there was a confluence of events. Ridley Scott becoming the director. It was his second feature film after The Duelists. People like H.R. Giger coming on board with his biomechanical creature designs, the special effects technicians, all the great British set designers, everybody, Jerry Goldsmith's score, and a lot of it was taken from a different score that he didn't even write for Alien, but still, everybody was at the top of their game, and the approach that Ridley Scott took had never been done. And it was peak verisimilitude for a science fiction film. And it did things like Star Wars before it, the lived-in futuristic world that it presented to us, absolutely real. The sets, the dripping sets, I mean, it was an oil refinery in space, and you basically had 7 blue-collar characters. That's why the movie was called The Eighth Passenger in France. And it was groundbreaking in its presentation of its horror. And again, it's hard to explain for somebody, if you've grown up in a world where Alien already existed, so if you grew up in a world after 1979, it always existed. But I was on that cusp of the genre film explosion that began in the 70s and really hit its zenith in the 80s and beyond, where I was able to see visions that no one had seen before. And I was in a very formative age, and how much they meant to me, I could never quantify. And the thing about Alien, it wasn't, look, on one hand, it's a haunted house movie in space. It's a slasher movie in space. It's about a big bug that comes to life. But the way it was presented, the tone of the film, had a very Lovecraftian, this idea, the cosmic infinitude of space. I mean, nowadays people think about the space jockey. Oh yeah, the engineers. None of that existed. And when you saw Alien, those questions were not answered. The derelict spaceship was there. There were thousands of alien eggs in it. The space jockey had clearly had a chest burster inside. We were never going to know anything about that character. Now, at the time, post-Vietnam and where America was in 1979, that movie came out at a very interesting time. I mean, 70s films, we had everything from Network and The Godfather, and I mean, take your pick. Clockwork Orange, Kubrick's film, Barry Lyndon, 70, that was, and what was going on with people, the directors, I mean, Bonnie and Clyde was a little earlier, but the level of violence, Texas Chainsaw Massacre in 74, there was all kinds of things going on cinematically in the 70s that were unbelievable. But Alien was not just, it wasn't Mario Bava's Planet of the Vampires, even though a lot of people say that it was influenced by that film, and it was. And by the way, that German 4K disc of Planet of the Vampires is dope. But, and you should, if you haven't seen Planet of the Vampires, what's wrong with you? So when Alien came out, the tone of it and the plot, in the hands of another filmmaker, it might have just been haunted house in space and a monster shows up and kills people. But Giger's design work and the thought behind it, and the Lovecraftian, the allusions to the old gods, and the fact that the cosmic infinitude of space is probably someplace man is never meant to be. And all of that. To have seen Alien when it came out, and this is not some flex where I'm going, if you people weren't there, you can't understand it. All I'm saying is that when it came out, the impact that it had on genre cinema was unquantifiable. I mean, everything else, it was so far beyond the charts to be nothing. There was nothing even in its wheelhouse, and the same was true of Star Wars. There was nothing comparable. It was something brand new that no one had ever seen before, and I would dare say there was a lot of those things. The Exorcist, Jaws, 70s populist genre filmmaking had a lot on its mind. And while the story of Alien is very simple, and as a 12-year-old, I might not have grasped a lot of the psychosexual of it all, but I felt it. Maybe not knowing how to quantify it, but the ideas behind it, and the fact that, I mean, you could look at that movie and just say, oh, it's a monster movie, which it was. But for me, at that time in my life, the transition between, I was going from elementary school to junior high, I was studying for my bar mitzvah, there was a lot of changes in my own life, and when this thing came along, it showed me something I hadn't seen before, and it deeply affected me. And then, of course, I used to show Alien. I had the VHS tape before anyone in our neighborhood had VHS tapes, and I had 15 kids at my house for my junior high every day, showing them movies that were wholly inappropriate. Sometimes my mom would get calls, your son showed my daughter, and there was nudity in Animal House, and blah, blah. Fuck off. But anyway, my mom could care less. She's like, they're movies. They're kids. What's wrong? Little did my mom know. But it was a hugely affecting movie. Now, that said, a lot of imitators, Alien, like Blade Runner after it, Ridley Scott's movies, because the way he shot them and the way they looked and the peak verisimilitude became incredibly influential. But if you want to look, and I would say one of the most satisfying and amazing sequels ever made was James Cameron's Aliens. Now, the funny thing about Aliens as a sequel, and suddenly now Alien becomes an IP. It's not just a one-off. It's now an IP with another filmmaker. And remember, Cameron was coming off of his B-movie triumph of The Terminator. You know, after everyone knows the story, Piranha 2, The Spawning. But The Terminator was, and despite Carlin Ellison getting credit and all that, The Terminator was, again, it wasn't as, when you saw it, because, look, it was a low-budget film, relatively low budget. But there was so much wit and verve, and the filmmaking was so, everything about it was so well conceived. It was clear that the voice, the filmmaking voice that was there, because a lot of people, my favorite filmmakers, John Carpenter at that time. I mean, 86, people forget this, but 86, and 20th Century Fox, by the way, in 1986, 20th Century Fox was touting at conventions and things. They had 3 huge genre movies coming out in the summer of 1986. They had Cronenberg's The Fly, they had Cameron's Aliens, and they had Big Trouble in Little China, John Carpenter's Big Trouble in Little China, which was an incredibly expensive film. I think it was like $26 million. Of course, that movie kind of bombed. Nobody understood it. But those 3 films, that's what 20th Century Fox Studios was doing. You had 3 visionary directors. I was already a huge Cronenberg fan. I was already a huge Carpenter fan. And I love Terminator. So Fox had the foresight and the wherewithal to have 3 filmmakers working in the genre space. Now, Aliens was a sequel, The Fly was a remake, and Big Trouble in Little China was an original film. But still, all 3 of those movies were groundbreaking. And the visionary nature of The Fly with its body horror as the AIDS epidemic was really ramping up and becoming horrific. People saw The Fly as an allegory for AIDS, what it did to the body. Aliens, of course, people said it was a Vietnam movie because Platoon came out in the same year. But the thing about Aliens that was amazing was it took Alien in an entirely different direction. It took a haunted house movie in space and turned it into a war film. You know, it was a war film in space. And what was interesting about Aliens and what it did was it presupposed a tremendous amount of intelligence on the part of the audience. It showed us things like when you saw the facehuggers, it knew that we, the audience, we only saw one facehugger. And when you saw in the lab in Hadley's Hope in Aliens that there were multiple facehuggers, I mean, that was like, oh, fuck. You know, it was the foreboding of that film. I mean, that movie has its pace like a rocket ship going to Mars. I mean, it's just amazing. Brilliant. And when you're watching this, it did not feel at all like Alien. Very, very different movie. Now, when Ripley is found in the shuttle, you know, the Narcissus from the Nostromo, that's the name of her shuttle, the Narcissus, and the company, everything that happens to her, and it's not really a trial, but her debriefing, you know, the all of that was so great because it's building on the first Alien, but it's taking you in an entirely different direction. You don't know where it's going. And it's not going anywhere that the original Alien went to. And it's an incredibly smart film, and from its very conception, one of the best sequels of all time, because it's so very different from the first movie, and yet it has to have the first movie in order to be effective. And you see James Cameron's genius in the writing and what he did with Alien. As a matter of fact, I would dare say it's probably one of the greatest examples of how do you take a franchise and take it to the next level. Now, of course, the Alien franchise, famously Alien 3, you know, you had Vincent Ward's idea, William Gibson wrote his script, and then David Fincher. I mean, I direct everybody to go watch Charlie Lazareca's documentary on the Alien anthologies. On the Blu-ray, he was able to update it from the DVD, and the documentary on the making of Alien 3 and the assembly cut of Alien 3, I think, is a terrific film. And the documentary is amazing. Is it a perfect movie? No. Is it as enjoyable and, dare I say, as fun as Aliens? No. However, It has a lot to say in its own. It goes into, again, a totally different direction. The religious overtones are more overt. The idea of these convicts and all that. It's a deeply compromised work from the producer and Fincher and all that, so it's never going to be what Aliens was. Alien and Aliens are tour de forces from two directors. And then, of course, you get to Alien Resurrection, Jean-Pierre Jeunet, who made one of my favorite movies of all time, Amélie, Tiet Delicatessen, City of Lost Children. Alien Resurrection, it's very French. I don't think it entirely works, but I'll tell you something. After tonight, in my estimation, Alien Resurrection has gone up in value. So, it's 2024. We've had AVP, AVP Requiem, Prometheus, Alien Covenant, How Many Dark Horse Comics, all kinds of things. The Alien universe is well-trodden ground. And the meaning of it all and what it meant to cinema and indeed what it meant to our culture has long been forgotten. It's now something that's been around since the 70s. And, I don't even know if people hold it in very high esteem anymore. I do, because it changed my life, the first Alien did. So, over at 20th Century Studios, you have a guy that I greatly admire named Steve Asbell, who's president of 20th Century Studios. And I've been calling him the quiet king of franchises. And this summer, he had the first Omen, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and Alien Romulus. They resurrected Hellraiser. They did Prey. So, the Predator, the Hellraiser, the Omen, Kingdom. Now, Terry Matalas has been reported to be writing Enemy Mine. Because Steve's playing it safe. He can't, maybe he'll be able to, if these movies get more successful, he'll be able to create new franchises. But 20th Century Studios, which used to be, of course, 20th Century Fox, 20th Century Fox gave me some of my most beloved memories of movies. They co-produced All That Jazz, one of my favorite films with Columbia. And, all the great movies that 20th Century Fox put out. My favorite logo in cinema. It was great hearing the fanfare. So now, Fede Alvarez, the director of Alien Romulus, I will say this. It's very, very funny because I remember when Alien Romulus was first announced, everyone knew it was called Alien Romulus, and then everybody was debunking that, going, no, that's not what it's called. Whatever. But, so I was very excited. I'm a fan of Fede Alvarez as a filmmaker. I liked his remake of Evil Dead. I really liked Don't Breathe. So I was very excited to see Alien Romulus. I went into it very excited tonight, took the ladies, had great seats, went to our local Harkin Cinema, a big fan of the Cine XL presentation they give, big screen, a lot of sound, Dolby Atmos, great auditorium. It's a great place to see a movie. You go, Harkin Cinemas. And I watched this film, and it's, of course, beautifully made. Use of physical effects, great. All that goes without saying, usually. Really well directed. I did not like Alien Romulus at all. And when I was watching it, to me, I'm watching this film, and it felt to me like I was watching and this isn't fair to say, but there was a movie that came out after Alien called Creature. And it was, even, I'll tell you something. If you go back and you watch Roger Corman and James Cameron, James Cameron worked at Roger Corman Studios. There was a movie that came out called Galaxy of Terror. That is when you watch it, you're like, it's very influenced by Alien, but it looks more like Aliens because the way it was made. A lot of the same people worked on it, including James Cameron. But Galaxy of Terror, it's more interesting because even though it was an Alien-inspired ripoff, I felt like Alien Romulus, to me, was like watching or listening to a greatest hits album of your favorite band, but it's all cover versions. The band that you love isn't playing their songs, it's other people playing their songs. That doesn't mean they can't be good versions of the songs, but that's how it was. I was watching Alien Romulus, and there was not one thing in that movie that surprised me. Not one thing. And one of the things about the Alien franchise, at least in the first 4 movies, and even to a certain extent in Prometheus and maybe a little bit in Alien Covenant, there are ideas in those films that are interesting, not entirely successful, but they're touching on ideas. And as I was watching Romulus, there were some ideas that were in the film that I found very intriguing in the last third of it, that were just that were extrapolations on what had come before, and I'm like, where's that movie? I mean, the plot, to me, it was just, there was nothing in it. It was, oh, here comes this scene. Oh, here comes this scene. Here's this thing, and here's that thing. It literally was an Aliens greatest hits movie, to the point where I wanted to shout at the screen, don't say that, don't say, oh, you said, there's, okay. When characters in universe are saying the exact same, I'll just flat out, it's a spoiler. There's a character, the line delivery is different, but there's a character in Alien Romulus who says, get away from her, you bitch. I can't tell you how much I want to reach into the movie screen, grab that character, and throttle him. Because what that does to me is, it's a moment, maybe it was studio mandated, maybe they, and this happens throughout. Whenever they do that, whatever reality, every film should have its own reality. But this movie kept breaking the fourth wall with, remember this, remember this, remember this, remember this. And if you didn't get it, oh, let's put a music cue here. Look at this guy. Remember this guy? He's from this person or this place. And I'm like, every time you do that, your movie, you are telling us, whether it's studio mandated, the filmmakers mandating it, are saying, we have failed, in my mind. Some people might like it, but I watch this and I'm like, your movie does not stand on its own. Your movie is constantly tipping its hand to movies that came before it. Aliens, now there's ways to do it. And like I brought up the previous example, if you're making a direct sequel to a movie, you're locked in, you're in that universe. But, like, for instance, we all know from the trailers that there are face huggers in this movie. There are more face huggers than we've ever seen in one place. There's a little bit added mythology to it. But when you're watching this and it's happening, it's just a riff on a scene we saw in Aliens already. And I'm watching this, it was, I hate to say it, boring. It was boring. Because you didn't put a twist on it. Not really. And in Aliens, what was so great, when they walk into that lab and you see the face huggers, 3 of them in containers, you're already there. That's James Cameron telling a smart audience, you're fucked. But you've already seen that before. And by the way, that does not break the fourth wall. Now, what they did in this movie was like comfort food. Like in Aliens, when you see this, you're thinking, oh shit. But in Alien Romulus, it's like, yeah, yep, facehuggers, better watch out. I mean, and I get it. These IPs are designed to create new audiences. The problem is, these movies are not new. As a matter of fact, Alien is on the way to being 50 years old. Half a century old. And unless you do something to extend that formula, The IP will never have, it'll never make as much money as you want it to make because it never has the impact. It doesn't have the impact on the audience, and it doesn't have the cultural impact. You know, Top Gun Maverick is an outlier. It's an anomaly. And I guess you could say maybe Deadpool and Wolverine, but Deadpool and Wolverine is something everybody wanted to see happen that it hadn't happened yet. So it's different. But the Alien movies, all this movie did, and by the way, Fede Alvarez did a good job directing it, but even the characters, the milieu, you're basically opening on Hadley's Hope. And if you've seen the director's cut of Alien, you've seen Hadley's Hope. You know, it's a mining colony, it's a shake and bake colony, and there are some really interesting ideas with those characters, but it's glossed over. I mean, I know they have to get to the alien action, but I found myself going, okay, so humanity is out living in shitholes, and people have to do these terms of service that are 12 years or 24 years or whatever, and it was all done. I mean, I thought that would have been a very interesting situation, but as the movie went along, I kept waiting for something that was new, that I hadn't seen before. And there was nothing I hadn't seen before. Other than the fact that apparently the alien life cycle was sped up for the movie, you know, and that was, I found that to be annoying. But what was interesting, it was almost as if, okay, we're going to give everybody an Aliens Greatest Hits compilation. But what it didn't give us was anything new. It didn't give us a tone. It didn't create a feeling. The first Alien and Aliens created feelings we'd never felt before. I kept waiting, and to, you know, it was like, this is a terrible thing to say, but if you're a guy, you might understand this, and if you're a girl, you'll understand this. We've all had people try and perform oral sex on us that weren't good at it. And they weren't good at it for various reasons. They either didn't really like it, they just didn't, they're not very aware, they never had a great technique. Now you're happy you're getting one, but at the end of the day, it's really more disappointing to get a badly delivered blowjob, or if you're going to go down on a woman, because a woman knows in 2 seconds if you know what you're doing or not. She'll put up with it, and maybe you can get her where she's going, but it's really just disappointing. This movie was like that for 2 hours. I kept waiting. I mean, I got my greatest hits, but that's all I got. I just got greatest hit after greatest hit after greatest hit after greatest hit. The Romulus station kept giving you, it's like, okay, let's go into this room so we can refer to Alien, we can go to Prometheus, and let's go into this corridor so we can, we can evoke aliens. And it was just one greatest hits thing after another. And it had some interesting, ideas. And then it's like, oh, a synthetic person that, it's that guy. And it was so frustrating to watch because it was competently made and Fede Alvarez wrote it and all that. But I felt like, what does the Alien franchise have to say to us as human beings in the year 2024? If anything. Now, I mean, even Top Gun Maverick had a character that knew that his time was over. And they show you that from the very beginning. That Pete Maverick, his days as a fighter pilot are done. So that idea, and that's something that all members of the audience are going to reach a point in their lives where their usefulness or what they've done, they're going to be supplanted by younger people, or more importantly, technology. In the case of Maverick, drone technology is going to replace the need for fighter pilots. Sad, but true. We're all right there. This movie had nothing to say. And all of the Alien movies, as much as I don't like Prometheus, it's one of the most beautiful looking science fiction films ever made. There are interesting, it's Eric Von Däniken and Chariots of the Gods and all that, but at least there was a kernel of an idea that I found interesting that drove me through that film. But this movie, there was nothing, and there could have been. they touched on certain elements. I mean, we as human beings are very close, whether the singularity is near. The idea that I really enjoyed, I will say this, when they got to this idea, and when you find out what certain people or what they were doing on this station, was interesting. I mean, we are on the cusp of being transhuman, creating our own genetically engineered children. And what does that mean? And what is that going to mean for humanity? There's a kernel of a really interesting idea there. So, you know, and then, I mean, I have to say it, there's been a lot of talk lately about actors who are, we already know that James Earl Jones has sold the rights to his voice. He's making some money for his family, generational wealth, good for you. That Disney can now digitize his voice and use it as Darth Vader in perpetuity throughout the universe, which I guess is cool, you know, and good for James. I'm going to take you out. But the thing about that is do we as human beings, are we destined now when people pass away, we're just going to recreate them digitally over and over again? Peter Cushing as Grand Moff Tarkin. I mean, I understand the impulse behind it, but what does that say existentially? What is that going to mean to us moving forward if you can recreate movie stars to be in movies? And I don't know. I think the new generation might not care. Do they care if they're going to watch a movie starring James Dean and Marilyn Monroe? I guess they might not. I would care, because part of the fun of watching those actors is watching those actors. Well, I mean, this movie brings back, I mean, spoiler alert, Ian Holm. Brings back Ash, although he's called Rook in this movie. And I'm watching this, and I'm thinking to myself, really? You know, you brought back Ash? You know, I'm looking at this going, why? I mean, honestly, you could have created a new character. He's not playing Ash, he's playing Rook, a different synthetic. I mean, one of the most interesting ideas I thought that they had in the movie was one of the main character has a brother who's a synthetic, not really her brother, and that relationship was something new that I think they could have leaned on a little bit more. I mean, clearly, because, well, we have to now, you know, give him the chip of the evil android so we can, again, make people go, well, is that synthetic going to be... And what's interesting is we saw the bad synthetic in Alien, and we saw the good synthetic Bishop in Aliens. And the thing about Bishop is, because we'd seen Alien, we kept waiting for Bishop to maybe turn bad. But he never did. He became a hero. And again, in Alien Romulus, what did we get? I prefer the term artificial person myself. No! No! Don't fucking say that line. Fuck you. That line doesn't belong to you. That's from another movie. A better movie. That made me sit in the theater and go, you know what? It was way better in the scene where Bishop says, I prefer the term artificial person myself. Get away from her, you bitch. What is the point? What is the point when people are doing this? You have all the money you need, Fede Alvarez. You did a wonderful job directing this movie. But everything in it was variations on themes or scenes we had seen before. And I found myself, and it's only because the Alien movies were so influential in my own life. Both Alien and Aliens. You know, they came out 7 years apart, but still they loomed large in pop culture. And I'm watching this movie, and I'm like, why the fuck am I watching this movie? What am I getting out of it as an audience member? The characters aren't that interesting. Again, variations on characters we've seen in a million different... It's a salvage crew. Oh, the interesting thing is we're going to get sleep cryo chambers so we can go to a different planet. And we found this thing. Okay, whatever. But how many movies have we seen where a group of disparate people, or in this case friends, go on to a rusted derelict ship and bad things happen. Haven't these people ever watched movies themselves? I'm always wondering when I'm watching movies, I'm like, did you guys not watch Alien? I mean, I know in the Alien universe, but they must have had variations on that. And I'm getting to the point, and people say, well, Rob, it's just not made for you. No, it's not made for anybody because it doesn't have anything to say. There was nothing in this movie that was at all original. It was an amalgamation of not just the Alien movies, but other science fiction films that even influenced Alien itself. But the thing about Alien was the original Alien presented things in a way that we'd never seen before. Alien Romulus presented things in a way we've seen countless times before. Countless times. And it was fucking annoying, to be honest. I'm watching this beautifully made movie, beautifully shot and all this, and I'm like, why am I watching this? Why this story? Even the story of going to a space station. I mean, if you look at it, Alien Resurrection, William Gibson's Alien 3 script. Already it was ideas, and it pissed me off as the movie went along. And there was one really interesting idea that actually, once again, let's go into the room and now let's touch on Prometheus. Let's bring back. And there's an interesting idea that sort of extended, but the idea of I mean, you have to see it. I mean, people have talked about the big swing that it took, but even that was like, we kind of saw that at the end of Alien Resurrection already. It just had the added spin of having a little Prometheus thrown in for good measure. I watched this and I'm like, is that where we're at now? Are we just doomed to watch these old IPs resurrected over and over to the point where they're not just resurrecting IPs now. They're now resurrecting dead actors that appeared in these IPs. I mean, look, Tron Legacy got away with it because Jeff Bridges was in the movie. They de-aged him. But to bring back an actor, it would have made more sense to bring back David, to bring back Fassbender from Covenant and from Prometheus. But no, we get Ian Holm. And I'm like, and by the way, we're still in the uncanny valley. And it was okay because he's a robot and you see him on screens a lot, but still, it's like, and it wasn't really Ash. It was a character named Rook who's serving the same. You'd think that wouldn't they make these androids look different? Like, wouldn't somebody catch on? I mean, I know Ash was a science officer that was put on the Nostromo late in the game, but wouldn't people sit there after a couple, decades going, these synthetics, I mean, I guess they all look the same or whatever, but I would say to make synthetics work, they give everybody a different face. I'm going, really? You have to make the villain, you have to make the overlord evil synthetic, you have to make that character Ian Holm from Alien, even to the point where he's like wearing the same shit, same clothes. And I'm like, because why? Because the audience has to sit there and go, oh, it's Ian Holm from Alien. I mean, I'm like, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? Why are you breaking the fourth wall? Why are you not making your own reality of a movie here? Why am I... And I know, in the grand scheme of things, people are dying all over the world. Why does anybody care? Well, for me, wanting to go into the entertainment business and being so enamored of these films when I was growing up, they were new. They were so influential and they meant so much to me because I'd never seen them before. Because they took me places I'd never gone. Because they filled my mind with thoughts I'd never had. Because they made me contemplate the universe in a way I'd never done before. As a 12-year-old, the cosmic infinitude of space, a place I wanted to boldly go one day. I'm like, fuck, I don't want to go into space. Fuck that. That shit's scary as fuck. I don't want to run into old gods. I don't want to run into xenomorphs. Those are like the most horrible shit ever. I mean, and it changes who you are. This movie, I have to say, I was seeing it with a 23 and a 21-year-old girl. The 23-year-old girl had never seen any Alien movies. The 21-year-old girl had seen all of them, and Alien is one of her favorite movies ever, and she hated this movie. She hated every callback. She hated it. Like, she didn't just dislike it when it was over. She was excited to see it. She goes, that was fucking stupid. And I'm like, well, you know, and all the filmmakers who made the movie, I can't fault them. You know, the movie was beautifully made, but I'm like, why do you have to have somebody say, get away from her, you bitch? I mean, first of all, what is the point of that? Like, I'm sure a studio executive thought it was great. Let's put that in there. Can you say that? Why? Get away from her, you bitch is fucking owned by aliens. You don't say that in another Alien movie. That's Sigourney Weaver's that moment's one of the great signature lines in science fiction, action, adventure cinema. The get away from her, you bitch, when she's in the power loader. You don't get to say that. And if you do say that, fuck you. Fuck you, Romulus. Why'd you do that? I was ready to fucking walk out of the theater. I was so fucking angry. And that's not the only line. I mean, I prefer artificial person myself. Same persons. It's like, here, we're going to use this person and give them lines to regurgitate. And by the way, what was the underlying meaning behind making a black man the artificial person who was in service of all these other people? That was a little weird. I don't know. I mean, there was some messaging there, maybe. Don't really know. Maybe it was a little of mice and men. Maybe it was a little... I don't know what the hell was going on there, man, but it was weird, but whatever. I hated that. Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? You sacrifice any reality. You've shattered. I know some people are like, what does it matter? It's cool. I get to hear that line. No, you don't. Because it reminds you of a much better moment in a better movie. Why do you do that? Like, why do you do that? You know, I prefer, and then it's like, I won't lie to you about your chances, but you have my sympathies. Fuck off! Fuck off! Fuck off, movie! Why do you do that? I don't know. Is that, you're referring back to a movie that's almost 40 years old, and you're referring back to another movie that came 79 and 86. Most of the audience that you're trying to get has never seen these movies before. They don't know what these lines are, and maybe that's the rationale. They'll never know. But what you've done is you've devalued those movies. Again, it's kind of like we live in our Simpsons world where everything has been parodied on The Simpsons. So when people go back and see it, the first thing in their minds is, oh my God, I saw that now. I understand what the parody was on The Simpsons, or wherever the fuck you see a parody thing now. So you can't even go back and enjoy our own historical pop culture without first thinking, oh, it's from The Simpsons. I know. With everything going on in the world, should it matter? It should matter, though. Because remember, everything should matter at every level. You know, just because it's just entertainment, it isn't just entertainment. It's our culture. And when you do that, you're devaluing our culture. I love movies. I do. They meant something to me. I grew up in a time. We live in a post-cinema age. Movies will never mean as much to generations from now on as they did to the generations growing up in the 20th century. Never. And that's okay. Things are supposed to change. But I hate it when now in this quest, because people are risk averse, they would rather go back and vandalize the past than create something new. I think you could make a really interesting alien film that its subtext would be dealing with things like genetic engineering, like the power of God. I mean, they refer to Prometheus, of course. They do have those touchstones, but they're done in a way like, let's throw this in, let's throw that in. But you got to make, the movie has to be about that. Stealing the power of fire from the gods, or whatever. You make it, it's just, oh. I wanted to love this movie so much. And I just felt this movie kept kicking me in the face. And I'm like, why are you doing this? Why did the studio, why do you have to say, get away from her, you bitch? Why do you have to say, you have my sympathies? Why do you have to say, I prefer the term artificial person myself? Give somebody their own catchphrase. Rather than use somebody's hand-me-downs. Somebody else wrote that. Are you going to give them story credit? No. Screenplay credit? No. It just drives me crazy. It's so disappointing. Anyway, I'm going off. I'm going on a rant. But, you know, when you're watching this, even the whole setup and how everybody acts, these characters, I mean, you know, there's a scene in Alien where Ripley is talking to Captain Dallas, and you know they have this, they've clearly fucked, and the way the performance is, they don't dwell on that. They don't, like, it's not like he kisses her and gives her a peck on the cheek, you know, because that's when you're on these long, when there's 7 of you on a flight, you know that Yaphet Kotto and you know that Lambert have fucked too. You know, I'll have this, but I'd rather eat something else. But right now, food will do. And the way she looks at him, because they fucked. Now, they don't have to tell you that they fucked, but they did. And you know it, because we're a smart audience. But the way Captain Dallas and Ripley talk to each other, they're adults. They didn't feel like they were written as characters that are immediately disposable. And it's like at the beginning of this movie, one of the characters is pregnant. Oh, really? We're dealing with life cycles and things that burst out of your stomach. You think that'll come into play later in the movie? I mean, they telegraph that stuff, and you're just waiting. You're sitting there going, well, I wonder when they're going to... And that, to me, just smacked of studio interference. Maybe it didn't. Maybe Fede Alvarez knew what he had to do. He was given a mandate. But I watched this movie, and I don't want to belabor the point, but it's like you have $100 million to make a movie, to make an Alien movie, and all the studio wants you to do is copy other Alien movies. You could have done something really unique. I don't know what that is, by the way. It's very hard to come up with a great Alien story, but I guess, okay. But here's the real thing. Maybe a 12-year-old kid will go in and see this movie, and it'll be shocking, and it'll have some great effect on that kid. Maybe that kid will decide because of seeing this movie he wants to become a scientist or a xenobiologist, or whatever the fuck he wants to be. But I'll guarantee you that's never going to happen. Because you know why? Because they've probably already seen Alien movies on video, and they'll watch this movie and going, I already saw that. He even said, like, Dad, he said, get away from her, you bitch. We saw that in Aliens. Why is it in this movie? I don't fucking know, kid. Because nobody believes that you deserve something new. Nobody understands. They don't. And the thing is, no one ever got really rich following trends in Hollywood. You get rich setting trends in Hollywood. But nobody will do that anymore because they're terrified. People don't even read books. The people that run studio... And the thing is, Steve Asbell, the president of 20th Century Fox, is a really smart guy. He knows his shit. And, I don't blame him. I like Steve. But if I ever saw him, he knows I'll tell him the truth. I fucking hated this movie. I hated this movie not because it's necessarily terrible. It's serviceable. I hated this movie because of what it represents. What it represents to cinema, what it represents to the Alien franchise, what it represents to IP filmmaking, what it represents to studios, what it represents to culture, what it represents to the future. Zero. It means nothing. It doesn't add to the franchise. People are like, well, it's the third best Alien movie. Is it? Is it because it's a serviceable recreation of both Alien and Aliens for the most part, with a little Prometheus and Covenant and whatever else thrown in? I'm surprised that we didn't find a fucking Predator skull on there, or maybe there was one hidden in the background. But I mean, this movie adds nothing to our rich cinematic history, and that made me really, really sad. And I wonder, is that even important anymore? Maybe not. Maybe nobody cares. Maybe nobody ever cared. I don't know. But, look, I hope the movie makes money. I want Fede Alvarez to do well. I want 20th Century Studios to do well. I want everybody to do well. So I never want to see a movie fail. But man, oh man, what a fucking disappointment this was for me. Let's see what you guys have to say. We'll see. I don't know. Is anybody even still watching this stream? Is everybody pissed at me like, geez, Rob, you fucking buzzkill? Mikey Lito, what are you doing up, Mikey? Thanks for hitting all the pet peeves about Romulus. Oh, well, thank you. I wish I didn't have to hit them. Shonen Kaiju says, I liked Romulus, but the line they gave Andy at the end drives me up a wall the more I think about it. Kind of the cherry on top of having just too much nostalgia bait. Hurt the movie for me. That's because you're a perceptive viewer. Yeah, the thing is, it's not even nostalgia bait. What it is, it's safe. It shows a contempt for modern audiences. Filmmakers in the 70s assumed the audience was smart. I mean, the great films in the 70s, if you go back and you watch them, a lot of people can't. Because let's face it, watching movies, and I've said this before, is a skill. You have to learn how to watch movies. You have to be cinema literate, just like anything else. You have to learn to read. You have to learn language. Cinema is a language. And there's a lot of people that are illiterate in the ways of cinema. I've often said there's people that cannot even watch when I bring up the Rob's Ennui trilogy test. Can you go back and watch, like Major Chai Chai took that test? A lot of people are physically unable to sit down and concentrate and watch La Notte, La Ventura, and The Eclipse. Michelangelo and Antonioni's Ennui trilogy. They don't know how. Because the movie doesn't follow the structure of films that were made in the last 30 years. The Sid Field 3-act studio structure. But now, it was the cherry on top. I'm just watching this movie as an exercise. This movie had nothing for me in it. Beautiful effects. I really like the idea of a spaceship crashing into the rings of a planet. But I was thinking the whole time, like, if a ship that big scraped up the rings, wouldn't it have sent like meteor storms into the planet? I mean, I'm like, are those people going to be okay? Guess it doesn't matter. I'm heating up my glasses and I need to read what you guys are saying. Let's see. Culture Wars Diplomacy said, to make a good franchise, it's not about liking the work, it's about respecting. Christopher Nolan didn't like Batman. Look, the thing about Christopher Nolan was he took the Batman character and made it his own. And I think that's why people responded. Like, when Heath Ledger was cast as the Joker, fans were up in arms. But when you saw what the Joker was, a post-9/11 agent of chaos, he was a terrifying and yet compelling villain, a Joker we'd never seen before. And that's what made that movie interesting. And he took the Batman franchise and did something different than Tim Burton had done. And certainly different than Joel Schumacher had done. And people responded to that. People always respond when you... And again, that's a good example to look at the two Tim Burton Batman movies, and then you look at the two Joel Schumacher movies, and then you look at what Nolan did, then you look at what Zack Snyder did, and you look at what David Ayer did, and you look at what Matt Reeves did. And all of them were dealing with the same characters, but they did very different things with those characters. And some people liked them more than others. I like them all in certain ways. I mean, I'm not going to say I love Batman and Robin, but... at least it was its own thing. Batman and Robin was not trying to be evocative of Tim Burton's Batman, first Batman. Not at all. He was trying to do, like, I mean, if you know anything about Joel Schumacher, he was flamboyant, and he was bringing a little Broadway to Batman. And it might have not worked. It worked better in Batman Forever, but it did something new. It wasn't like, remember the Tim Burton Batman you liked? Well, here's a callback to that. Chicks dig the car. I mean, it's just, that was actually Batman Forever. But Marco Esquindola says, I knew this was going to be the case the minute I saw the trailer. Shame. I wish they'd have gone forward from Prometheus. I don't know if they could, because even that was sort of ill-conceived. It looked good, though. Joseph Curtis said, love you and respect your opinion, but this film had the grit, heart, and sense of dread the franchise needed. Best character development since Aliens. Really? I mean, I liked our main character, and I really liked the relationship she had with her synthetic brother. I liked those two characters. I liked him better when he was both his old self and combined with the new directives. That character became really interesting. And somebody, again, rather than work through it would have been interesting to see, because he was evolving, and when they put the new program in, it would be interesting to see him continue on that path. Would he have developed a soul? But no, they have to have the thing taken out and make him retarded again. Can I say that? Make him mentally challenged. Let's do that at the end of the movie, where you could have gone and showed us something interesting. You could have seen the evolution of a character, rather than, I'm going to turn him back the way he was, developmentally disabled, or whatever. Hunter asks if I watched the Alien play that came out a few years ago by a high school production. No, but I heard it was really good. I saw snippets of it. It was pretty clever, but I didn't watch the whole thing. Aurora Uplinks, who's been a member of the channel for 15 months. Thank you for that. I think the android is what is needed for a good Aliens film. 3 and 4 didn't have it. AVP Requiem didn't. And the android gives depth and opposing ideals. Well, I agree when they use him right. But see, the idea, it was set up that an artificial person, a synthetic, was evil in the first movie because he worked for the company. He was a tool of the company, and he doesn't have his own free will, whereas Bishop was not a tool of the company. Bishop was not allowed. He was his own person, so he wasn't a Weyland-Yutani operative. And it was interesting seeing a synth who was a good synth become a Weyland-Yutani operative. But then when you have both of those things, where does that character go? And again, this idea, that something's up, and in the space station they have to go find whatever the experiments that were going on. And here's another thing. This struck me. Why is everyone ultimately so stupid about these xenomorphs? Like, they show these scientists, they know enough to go harvest or find an alien from the destruction of the Nostromo. They bring him back to Romulus Station, and then it always goes awry. I always hate that, because of course it does. It would have been more interesting to me if these scientists, it didn't go awry, and they found something more unique. It's like, we get to the station and it's already been destroyed, just like Hadley's Hope was in Aliens. Why does that always have to happen? In Aliens, the reason that the xenomorphs were unleashed is because no one knew what the fuck was going on. Why? Because Carter Burke didn't warn them. They just wanted to see what was going to happen. And clearly, it took place in a situation where Carter Burke was able to be briefed about all. You retroactively go look at this, and it takes place like 20 years after Aliens and 20 years after Alien and 30 years before Aliens. So they already knew all this stuff. Well, boy, for 57 years, they really don't know much about how to contain this problem. And I hate that. It's so lazy. You see these scientists at the beginning of the movie that seem to know what the fuck's going on, and then of course they're already destroyed. They're not that smart. They're pretty stupid. So wouldn't Weyland-Yutani know how dumb? Like it's like you can't do this anymore. And like, okay, here's another question I have. So you have this station, this big space station where everything goes awry. There seemed to be a lot of people on that station. It was fucking huge. There was no contact with the outside world. There was no contact with Weyland-Yutani. That thing was able to drift for a long enough period of time that it got sucked into the gravity well of a planet. Like, it's exactly what everybody wanted. Nobody, like, Rook was not in contact with Weyland-Yutani back on Earth. It's like, how does that even happen? I didn't buy it. They did not give me enough information. Scott Bartholomew says, just call the xenomorphs in AR. The Gorn. Mikey Lito says, I need a comment about Ian Holm. Well, I think I gave you some of those. Scott Bartholomew says, I would pay to watch Otoy tackle Star Trek. Well, I don't know. I don't know if they could write a great Star Trek story. Maybe they could. Mike Alito says, thanks for hitting all my pet peeves about Romulus. Oh, well, I hope I didn't miss any. Lava1701 asks, Rob, what do you think of Cameron's fucked up 4K of Aliens? You know what? I'll tell you something. I'm in the minority on this one. I like it. I know. Here's the thing. I'm complex when it comes to my opinions. So, I've seen Aliens a million times. And Aliens was a very grainy movie. And always was the film stock they used. And what's interesting about the Aliens 4K is it was like, for me, watching a different movie. Now, I own the Blu-ray of Aliens in the Alien Anthology, so I can always go back and watch that. The 4K of Aliens, when I was watching, because to me, I put it on, I was incredulous. It was wild to watch that because it's almost like you're watching a reimagining of how that movie is supposed to look. It looks totally different. And when I was watching it, I'm like, this is a really different experience. Now, I'm fundamentally against what he did to it. And hearing his comments this week were incredibly disappointing about home video and stuff, because my philosophy, the Rob Burnett philosophy of home entertainment, and keep in mind, I started working in home video 44 years ago. I started working at video stores when I was 13. And there were no video stores. I worked at what was considered in Seattle the second video store in the United States. Mainstream video store in the United States. And my feeling is that the best home video transfers they try and replicate what the director and what the director of photography was trying to create at the time the movie was shot. Because when you talk about recreating the theatrical experience, you weren't even, the theatrical experience, you're looking at something made off the negative. It doesn't have the resolution of the negative. So what you want to do is recreate the honesty of what that original negative is. That's what my philosophy, that's what I want to see out of my favorite transfers. The best photochemical transfers, when you go back and you look at, say, Die Hard. Die Hard always looked shitty on home video until they got to the 4K because it was very hard to duplicate Jan de Bond's photography with all because the colors of NTSC video, until you got to 4K, it never looked as good as it did. And they were trying to make it look like Jan de Bond's original negative, what John McTiernan directed. So that's my philosophy. That's what I want. That's my baseline. But Aliens was a totally different thing. When I watched it, I'm like, this does not look like Aliens has always looked to me. However, I liked it. Against my better judgment. I was looking, and people talk about the fact that they went and they made it out of an old transfer using AI. Well, that's fucked up. They should always go back to the original negative. But the problem is, the original negative of Aliens, it's like people who get 4K discs of Ghostbusters and Close Encounters, like, oh, this is so grainy. People don't understand these days because it's been a long time. They didn't grow up reading Cinefex magazine. They don't understand what optically printed. When you're looking at a lot of the old visual effects, you're looking at layers of photography that are optically printed together, which means things are going to be grainier. They're going to be dirtier. They're going to be softer. That's how things were made. So when you see a lot of these 4K transfers of older movies, especially effects-driven ones, people get pissed. And I hate that because that means they're uneducated. I know they want them to look better. Everybody wants them to look like a Pixar film, but they're not going to because they're not digital. They weren't generated by a computer. They were crafted by hand. And I've never been bothered by grain, especially grainy or dirtier effect shots. One of the reasons that they thought that they had to, once they remastered the original Star Trek, is the optical effects in Star Trek were so dirty, the multi-layers of, because of done for TV, that when you put it up against the beautiful live action, the clean negative, because remember, the original Star Trek series, when it was transferred, they had cut negative of every episode, and all the effect shots were optically printed effects, and that's why they were much dirtier. So the thought was that if we if we put these out on Blu-ray, the resolution's so good, and it's going to be jarring when you go from the effect shots to the live action shots. And so that's why they decided to do the new CG effects. My problem with the CG effects is they're very uneven. As they went along, they got better and better. And to me, the real telltale sign about CG, one of the things I can't stand, is an effect shot is only as good as how well it was designed. Meaning, like if you have a CG shot of spaceships, the speed, like the thing about Star Trek is, they're giving you the illusion that these are capital ships at sea. So when you see them moving through space, you shouldn't see the Enterprise go wow like that. I mean, it could, or it could tumble end over end. It could do a lot of things, but from our perspective, it doesn't work because the Enterprise is supposed to be a big, giant, fucking 3-masted ship. So when you see, like in Star Trek II, the battle in the Mutara Nebula between the Enterprise and the Reliant is so effective because ILM always made sure that these ships were pounding on each other like ships at sea. So even though that's probably not, I mean, in all reality, the ships in Star Trek are so far apart, you'd never see them together. You would never see these two ships fighting in such close quarters. But it works because of the design of it all and the way we think about things. But when you listen to Star Trek, the ship's 6,000 kilometers away. That's like the ship's on the East Coast and it's firing at some ship on the West Coast. Because when you're dealing with weapons that travel at the speed of light or photon torpedoes or whatever, that's what you're dealing with. But we don't think about it in those terms. We think about close quarters. So it's all an illusion, which means the effects have to work in the context of the story that's being told. But anyway, Lava 1701, I know you probably don't like my answer about the Aliens Blu-ray, but I found the Aliens Blu-ray a fascinating experience because it was so different. And I kind of liked where it was going. It annoyed me that they made that kind of a change, and I felt like, here's my problem. As a post-production supervisor myself, one of my favorite things to do when I work on a movie is to sit in a color grading session with a colorist that really knows what they're doing and watching them adjust the negative and getting the exact colors that you think are supposed to be there. And that's all you're doing is taking, all you have is the negative and then the controls, which is different than photochemical, but and they become so sophisticated, you want to recreate what the negative was supposed to look like, the way it was shot. Nowadays, you know, when you're shooting something on a red, you have to figure out how it's going to look after you've shot it. You have to put a LUT on it or whatever, however you wanted to do it. And there's a way they think when I was working on Lord of the Rings, I didn't realize they created proprietary digital grading software where you could go in and I did the piece on the Fellowship of the Ring disc. I would have made it 2 hours long, but you know, people are like, you have to make it shorter, Rob, because who's going to care about digital grading? But I did. You know, and watching that piece, I couldn't believe what they had done. So, Coach Sipping Jamba Juice says, sadly, it seems like Hollywood can only hit on old IPs. Not only do they give less chances to new IPs, but their execution on them is severely lacking. Oh, I know, man. I know. It bums me out. It bums me out. But look, it's really hard. And also, one of the things that you have to remember is that the people that are making movies today, and this is not to slam on everybody, but I think there's probably something to be said that even our educational system, we, especially here in America, we don't even have the basic general education anymore that people were getting at, say, my age. I mean, it used to be that the general education you would get in public school, I went to a very good public school. I came from an upper middle class environment, which was mostly families, and the school levies always passed. And on Mercer Island, now I couldn't even afford to live there. It's ridiculous. But where I grew up, we had a great public education system. And an overall general education was really important. We don't have that anymore. You know, people are living too much in their heads with not enough practical experience. That's why, you know, you have all these people, people talk about keyboard warriors. Well, the reason people are keyboard warriors is because they have less and less practical experience actually living in the real world, and they're more interested in the ideas of what they think right and wrong is without understanding the shades of gray that happen. And once you have to deal with people face to face, and you have to work with people and realize that there's all kinds of people out in the world that don't necessarily meet with your standards, we don't have that as much as we used to have. So there was a level of common sense, there was a level of experience, there was a level of understanding in the world that I honestly think we don't have anymore. Like I talk about this a lot on my show, but like all of our the people that are writing modern Star Trek, one of the reasons I can't stand it is because they don't there's no credibility when it comes to, say, military discipline, or they still use military ranks. People are like, well, Rob, Gene Roddenberry said Star Trek wasn't military. Okay. Yeah, it is. That's why they use military ranks. So you can say Roddenberry, and there's always people that come out of the woodwork and go, no, these guys, the reason they did that is because they were in the fucking military. They fought in World War II. And so they knew what it was like, that where the planet was fighting a force that was already hell-bent on exterminating groups of people, not just the Jews, but they would have got around to exterminating a lot of people if Germany had captured the world. Nowadays, nobody has that. And that's why so much everybody's favorite genre shows were, and I harp on this a lot, I say it euphemistically, but it's kind of true. Joss Whedon's work in Buffy and Angel. Everyone's trying to write fantasy shows like that. And that's all they're writing, because they don't have the real world experience that I think a lot of us had when we were younger. And the people that were making the things that we love had more than that. I don't know if Ridley Scott lived through World War II. I mean, he's in his 80s now. Maybe he did. I don't know. When he was a kid, I don't know if he has memories of that. But you had people that were very aware of those things. We don't have that anymore. And so people are not... I think the level of intelligence isn't where it could be. Cup of Joe Media says, Rob, I just got here, but this being the 2020s, I disagree with every opinion, and I will not offer any evidence or rebuttals to your opinions because, Cap, thanks for all the amazing conversations. Because Cap is my new favorite word. I appreciate that. Scott Bartholomew says, Mpox is spreading. Everyone needs to be vigilant. Well, yeah, it's funny. It's funny you say that. Hang on, let me just... Hapkido Locke says, I share your pain on Romulus. And hey, happy birthday. I appreciate that. Thank you. Sheriff Carl, all the way up in the PNW, says, watched it at the Bay Theater in Ballard today. At least the popcorn's good there. I blurted out a fucking come on, man, when the bitch line came out. Could tell the other dudes around me felt the same. It was a nice movie to look at, but that's it. Yeah, it was a little disappointing. Roberto Suarez. Roberto's here. It's the greatest hits of the entire franchise, good, bad, and ugly. About a third of the dialogue is recycled from previous films. Multiple scenes were direct recreations of iconic alien moments. Ultimately, they wasted Alvarez on a nostalgia play. Well, he was complicit. He knew what he was doing. Joseph Curtis, again, he had said, love you and respect your opinion, but this film has the grit, heart, and sense of dread the franchise needed. Best character development since Aliens. I know I read that, but I can't go with you there. It was a recreation of that stuff. But I want originality from the Alien franchise. I really do. But Scott Bartholomew talked about Mpox is spreading. Everyone needs to be vigilant. Yeah, it's our own fault. It's and if we're gonna have another Mpox, there's already Big Pharma going, we have 10 million doses of a vaccine ready to go. Well, anyway, I think I'm gonna bring this show to an end. I've ranted enough. I know people get bummed out. I was really excited to see this movie. I was really pulling for it. I wanted it to be great. I was shocked at how much of the Alien franchise they recycled. I really was. And I don't know. Fede Alvarez made Don't Breathe, and that movie's a banger. And I really love that film. That was an original film. I think it's his best film. and it has shocking stuff. So I'm a fan of Fede Alvarez, and I'm a fan of his. And I even went into his Evil Dead remake, Dubious, but I came out really enjoying it. This, however, I mean, his work's fine. The movie looks good. But at the end of the day, I don't know. I guess we're destined to live in this culture for a couple more decades. I mean, what are they going to remake in the next 10 or 15 or 20 years? I don't know. But look, I think everybody should go see it and make up their own minds. Don't necessarily listen to me. I want to see this movie succeed. I want everybody involved in it to make some money so we can get more genre cinema. But my God, man, please take some chances. I will say this. I'm very interested to see Noah Hawley's Alien TV series now. I have no idea where that's going to go, but I'm really curious to see it. And I never really liked Alien Resurrection very much, but this movie made me want to go watch that again. So, can't watch it in 4K, but I can watch it on Blu-ray. And I would recommend everybody, if you don't have it, get the Blu-ray of the Alien Anthology and watch Charlie de Lauzirika's documentaries, because they're all worth watching. And on that note, I'm gonna leave. I want to thank everybody for being here. I know this was a last minute. I wasn't gonna go on tonight. Tomorrow, I'm gonna go talk more about Tony Stark and Doctor Doom. I have a follow-up show I want to do about Tony Stark and Doctor Doom, because I have a lot more thoughts about that. Let's see, hang on. I saw a new super chat come in from Zachary Tomasi. Zachary Tomasi says, let's see what Zachary says. Well, I'll tell you what Zachary says, something he's goddamn right about. Zachary says, I'm 21, and I'm always frustrated by the lack of new and original ideas. I've been watching more classics that I've missed, so much more originality and thematic depth. Finally watched Lawrence of Arabia. Zachary, you and I park our shuttlecrafts on the same shuttle bay. I mean, look, I hate to say it, but, you know, if you start working your way through the... I say this because it's an easy repository, but the AFI 100, the 100 greatest films, if you start going back and watching those movies, and I felt this way in film school when I was at USC, especially watching a lot of old classics I hadn't seen, I was always amazed by how good they were. It's like, oh, these movies are classics for a reason. So yeah. Nick from Echo Base Network, I know we're supposed to talk tomorrow, saw it as well tonight and was super hyped, but ended up being disappointed. Me too, man. Nick, we're going to do tomorrow, I think, or later today for you. But yeah, and we don't, the thing is, we don't want to be disappointed. Like, it was Thursday night. It was opening night. It was preview night. I mean, I don't go to screenings. I don't get invited to press screenings, but I went there totally hyped, totally excited. I wanted to love it. I went in wanting to love this fucking movie. And, you know, somebody's going to say, oh, Rob, it's not for me. Why isn't it for me? Why isn't it for me? Why is it being made for what? Who is this movie being made for? Are they? Here's the thing. Ask yourself this. Is the studio saying, we're going to take a franchise that began in 1979 and we're going to give you a greatest hits of things that were done better and before in other movies in order to do what? Are you trying to create new fans of a franchise that began in 1979? Well, if you're going to do that, rather than just put young people that maybe you can recognize, you have to make the movie about the audience of today. How do you take your franchise idea? You can't just show people a greatest hits compilation because it worked better in those other movies. What you have to do is make your franchise relevant to today, and not by making it more inclusive ethnically. You have to have an underpinning. What is our society? Where is our society now that it wasn't in 1979? What's going on in our society? A lot of interesting things, identity politics being one of them. The idea of synthetic people, leaning into that. A little bit of that was in this movie. What will it mean if we create sentient AI? What happens? What happens when the singularity comes? You know, I mean, what's really interesting is why, if you have people, artificial person, why are you putting human beings in proximity to fucking aliens? Why don't you have an entire research crew made up of synthetics? Why are you putting biologics next to fucking aliens that want to implant biological creatures to extend their life cycle? I kept waiting in the movie for some explanation. You get to see all these slaughtered human people. They knew enough to go find that fucking thing. How come they don't just have fucking synthetics working with the aliens? Why would you put human beings or any living creature next to the aliens? Why would you do that? Why? Why are you giving them food and incubation material when you don't have to do that? I mean, my God, Rook Ian Holmes, the only person that fucking survived. Why? Because he's a synthetic. No chest bursters. Not with fucking robots. Why are they putting human beings in proximity? If you have a whole research base looking into these things, why are human beings doing it? I'm sorry, but this is well, Rob, you just have to have a suspension of disbelief. Really? Really? You've got synthetics all over the place, and you've got aliens that gestate inside living beings, whether they're cows, whether they're dogs, whether they're humans. I mean, how smart are you? Why are these research scientists so stupid? I mean, that's a real big question. And that was something that was floating in my mind as I'm watching the movie. I'm like, especially when you get to the scene we've already seen in Aliens, when you find all the resined up people in the hive. Except I was expecting somebody to go, kill me, because it's too long, they're already dead. But you have to ask yourself, when I was watching that scene, I'm like, why are there humans at all? Why don't you have a whole ship of... Do you need human beings? Can you only have one synthetic? It's so fucking stupid. I mean, that is a insurmountable story point that I was always bumping on in this movie. I'm like, what? I'm sorry. I know that's just how the Alien franchise is supposed to go, but if you're actually doing research on these things, they constantly have human beings. What? Haven't you learned by now? Apparently not. Anyway, that's really annoying. It's just really annoying. Let's see. Let's see. Where are we at? D Duval 59 says, I could tell from the first trailer this movie was not it was just the same shit, but now I hear it's doing everything awful. Everything awful things these legacy sequels do, which is reheat the best parts of the previous ones, and it tastes terrible every time. You're right. You were right, D. Duval. That's what I don't understand. Is that all they know how to do? It doesn't make sense. Cup of Joe Media. Oh, I already said that. Hapkido Locke says, I already did that too. Claudius says, shows about war and conflict require balance in order to maintain their verisimilitude. The aliens, Empire, Ivan Drago need to be beatable, not just forces of nature. The good guys need to remain competent and capable. Totally agree. I totally agree, Claudius. That is very perceptive. People seem to forget that, though. Why? Because they don't read enough. People don't read enough anymore. Cup of Joe Media says, one more for you, Rob. Does this temper your expectations for Nosferatu, being that it's another remake and all? Another remake of a remake. I like Robert Eggers, and I really love The Witch, and I really love The Northman, and I really love Lighthouse. And I would assume that Robert Eggers wants to tell this story again because he has something new to bring to it. At least I would hope so. I'm excited for Robert Eggers as a filmmaker, because so far he hasn't disappointed me. I feel that when I was knocked out by The Witch, did I love The Lighthouse? Probably not, but I very much appreciated The Lighthouse, and when I was watching it, I'm like, this is something new. And I thought The Northman kicked ass. So, yeah. So no, I mean, I'm a fan of filmmakers. I always go in and I want everything to be good. I do. I go in, I mean, as much as I bitch and moan and complain, I want things to be good. I really do. Some people might think I don't, but I really do. I don't like bitching about things, especially things I love. I mean, look, man, I have Pearl here. This thing, this thing must weigh 40, 50 pounds. It's so heavy. Totally resin. I mean, do I have to, does this show my bona fides to how much I love I have an Alien one sheet. I'm a big Alien fan. But my God, man, I'm so tired of giving me snippets of the film, the various themes in the movies. I fucking hate that. I hate that. I hate it. Like, I get it. I saw that movie. I've played the soundtrack a lot. But it's like, in case you didn't get where this is from, let's give you a hint. I mean, what am I, stupid? I hate it. And, I'll tell you something else. That, the aliens are, you know what this movie did, too, that I think is its greatest sin? It wasn't scary. I mean, it was like these aliens, it didn't matter how many there were. You have a gaggle of face huggers, you have a gaggle of alien warriors. They're not scary. I mean, people are like, well, let's go run right back after them. I mean, it wasn't, you saw too much, man. These characters, they were never, an Alien, it was the way that, and I do appreciate the physical effects, but the way the alien was shot. In this, it was like, whatever. And that was another thing. That was a mistake. It was a mistake. Lewis says, for all of its many flaws, Prometheus was the only somewhat original and creative sequel post-Alien 3. Shame the script wasn't smarter. Totally agree. Totally agree with you. Claudia says, by the way, bonjour, Robert. If you haven't, please watch Mr. Robot. I did watch Mr. Robot, a story well told. I ended up really enjoying Mr. Robot. Very much worthwhile. And I really liked where it went. I love the final episode. I like Mr. Robot a lot. But again, it felt like when you're watching that show, they knew what they were doing. They knew where they were going. And it had a lot to say, again, about today. What is our culture today? Yeah. But on that note, I'm going to let everybody go. I want to thank everybody for supporting this channel. As I said, I'll be back tomorrow talking Tony Stark and Dr. Doom. I found an article with somebody that actually agreed with me about this. I'm fascinated by this turn of events. So I got more to say about it tomorrow, so join me. Probably around 9. The only reason I went on late tonight is because I was at the movies. But look, again, I want to encourage everybody to go see the movie. Make up your own mind. Don't listen to me. And if you think I'm full of shit, write down in the comments. Please like, please subscribe. And if I might ask, look, I'm working in a venerable old genre myself currently, creating a 10-part, 10-chapter audio drama that is based on a book set in the 30s, going back over well-trodden ground. But I'm hoping that what we're doing is new and unique, and it is adapted from a 40-year-old book. So I, too, am going back into a well-worn genre, but I hope I'm going to bring something new to it, along with Max Allan Collins' script. So please go to Kickstarter. Please look up True Noir, truenoir.co, and support it if you want. We're down to within the last 30 days of our Kickstarter. We're only looking for $30,000. I mean, it'd be nice to make $500,000, but that wasn't what we were asking for, and I promise you, you're going to love it. I'm working my ass off on it. I'm going to go work on it right now, as a matter of fact. But anyway, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And if they play soundtrack music from other movies and they quote lines from other movies and have characters say them unironically, fucking get up and leave. No, I'm just kidding. Don't do that. All right, everyone. And as always, have a better night. Have a better night.